Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
Welcome to The Health Advocates, a podcast that breaks down major health news of the week to help you make sense of it all. I'm Steven Newmark, Chief Policy Officer at the Global Healthy Living Foundation.
And I'm Zoe Rothblatt, Director of Community Outreach at GHLF.
Our goal is to help you understand what's happening in the healthcare world to help you make informed decisions to live your best life.
Yeah, and Happy New Year, listeners. Today, we decided to kick off the new year with our interview with Nitika Chopra. She's a really strong advocate from the community, and I'm excited for you guys to have a listen.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Zoe. 2025, we made it. All right. So, as you said, it's a great way to start the year is by talking to one of our friends. Nitika Chopra is the pioneering force behind Chronicon, a renowned media and events conglomerate dedicated to empowering individuals living with chronic illness. Nitika's own health odyssey began at a tender age with a diagnosis of psoriasis at age 10 and psoriatic arthritis at age 19. These conditions became defining aspects of her life for over 17 years, inspiring her to transform her experiences into a catalyst for change. I can't think of a better way to start the new year than, as I said, talking to a fierce advocate such as Nitika.
Awesome. So let's get started.
Welcome, Nitika. Thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to introduce you to our listeners. So why don't we start there? Can you start by introducing yourself and give a little bit of your background?
Sure. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I was so happy to be here. And yeah, my name's Nitika Chopra, and I am the founder and CEO of Chronicon and the president of the Chronicon Foundation. I started Chronicon in 2019 and have been living with chronic illnesses for over 30 years. And it's a passion that I don't think I'll ever stop being passionate about. So I'm excited to be here and talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome to the Health Advocates. And maybe let's start there with your personal health journey. What was that like for you, and how did it inspire you to become like a chronic illness advocate?
Yeah, well, I got diagnosed with psoriasis at the age of 10, which is an autoimmune disease, a skin disease, and a decade later ended up getting psoriatic arthritis. And I never thought I would be talking about my health in this way. I never thought that this would be a part of my work. Growing up, we didn't have the internet for most of the time I was growing up. So it's not like I was on Instagram at like 10 years old looking at health advocates. I was just kind of dealing with it on my own. And I was the only person in my family who had gone through this kind of thing with their health in terms of with their skin and things like that. So I felt really alone, and I felt like I was the only person in the whole world that had kind of condition. And it felt very real. Like that was my truth for a really, really long time. And then I would say when I was in my mid to late 20s, I had moved to New York, and I started to meet people who were writing books and writing blogs and life coaching and doing all this stuff that I had never heard of. I mean, writing books, of course, I had heard of, but I never met a person who wrote a book. Obviously a very hard thing to do, but anyone can decide that they want to write a book. And I didn't even know that people could do that. So I went through this whole journey of starting a company, writing a blog, going on TV, doing a lot of stuff in media. And then I would say in like 2016, 2017, 18, like a lot changed in this country in particular. And it really just had me, like it pushed me to say like, okay, I was talking about skincare and wellness at the time, and I liked it, but it wasn't really getting to the depth of what I wanted to get to. And I was just kind of yearning to figure out what that was going to be. And I thought of Chronicon throughout that process. So yeah.
I have a very specific question. Do you remember the first time you ever met another person with a chronic condition?
Well, that's a good question. So my grandmother had myasthenia gravis, which I actually got diagnosed with after getting a really bad case of COVID in 2021. And I'm in remission from that now, but she was the only person that I really knew that had a chronic illness. Myasthenia gravis is a rare neuromuscular disease. A lot of people think it's MS at first. Like there's a lot of similarities to how it shows up. And so she had gone through tremendous difficulty with her health. She had a tracheotomy to speak out of through her throat. She had bypass surgeries. She was on a respirator. It was really intense, but it still felt very separate from what I was going through because I was a kid in school. I was trying to date. I was also dealing with something that was it was visible in a very different way because my whole body, like 98% of my body was covered with psoriasis for about 17 years. So it's just like a very different social experience because I was meeting people and trying to put myself out there for sort of the first time in my life, where she was already married and had her 3 kids, and it was like very different. Of course, also incredibly hard, but just in very different ways.
I find it so relatable what you said about just like, you didn't know, like, oh, these are real people that can write books. Like, even meeting other people in the chronic illness community, you're like, oh, wait, like, it's just a girly like me. And like, right before this, we were chatting about our hair. It's like, you think you're so alone in this journey, and then you start connecting, which makes me want to ask you more about Chronicon and the events you've hosted. You talked about, finding your voice and thinking about Chronicon and what that looks like. Can you like tell us a little bit more about what that looks like today?
Yeah, so Chronicon started as a large in-person conference. We had hundreds of people at the first conference and thousands of people online. And it was really like a very surreal experience in so many ways because I had this idea. I had been doing events. I had never done a conference before, but I had been doing events for a long time, for about 10 years before I started Chronicon. And I had done these events called self-love celebrations, and I had done like workshops and stuff, but they were, just like hangouts, like parties. Like these are like really fun with hundreds of people still, but they weren't like this huge endeavor in the same way. And I was so nervous. I did not know if a single person was going to want to come to a conference about being chronically ill. I was kind of like, well, who would want to come to that? I want to go, but like, I don't know if anyone else is going to want to go. And we sold out, and it was just remarkable. Like we had people upset that they couldn't get a ticket. And I was just like, I didn't know I needed to book a bigger venue. Okay, next time I will. So that's how it started. And then a few months later, the pandemic started. And it was obviously a shock to all of us. And being immune compromised myself and being in a community with people who are immune compromised, it was another level of intensity, I think, for a lot of us. And I know for myself, for sure. So I had to do a lot of soul searching and figuring out what this could look like. We built an app. We have a community online. And so we gather there virtually, and we still do that every week. I host workshops in the app, and our community leaders host workshops every week as well in there, which is great. And then we did a live conference in 2023 as like our kind of comeback from the pandemic. And then this year in 2024, we ended up doing a tour, which I actually really love. I think that's what we're going to do in 2025 too. I'm going to do 2 tours, and one in the spring, one in the fall. And I loved it because as someone with a chronic illness myself, who I have 2 chronic illnesses, one in remission, and it's a lot of output for me to put on a conference and like manage everything. And I really do most things pretty much by myself. So I wanted to do something where I was able to give a lot to the community and create that impact, make sure people could still get together and feel that support, but not burn myself out at the same time. And I feel like it's also important to be that model for others, because a lot of times with chronic illness, you're kind of told, well, that's kind of it. Like you can only do certain things. You can't do it all. So finding that way to do the work in a way that also serves me has been really important.
Yeah. In creating Chronicon, was there any particular moment that you look as sort of like that aha moment or the most rewarding thing? Like this was great. It was a lot of work, but oh man, I feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just after the first conference, I was just in shock for like months, I think, after. And sometimes I still am in shock of just like what happened in that first conference and what continues to happen from then. But I just remember people from all over the world came to the first conference, and we just had people who were so emotional and feeling like they had met their people, like they finally had friendships like they've never had before. Just so many layers to how meaningful this had become for them. And again, it was just like something that I thought of because of something I went through. I didn't think that it would have like that big of an impact. It was just like what I wanted to do and what I felt I needed. So yeah, that first conference I think was like the biggest aha moment. And then I think honestly just like creating the conference, like I had this whole moment when I decided to do Chronicon. I was walking around another conference called CurvyCon, and my friend was modeling there, and I was like, okay, I'll come with you, like check it out. And I had this experience because I was in that mode of searching of like, what is this next thing I'm supposed to do? I don't really know. And I watched all of these brands like celebrate the people in the conference, like the women and the individuals who were there with curvy bodies. No brand was like, oh, you can only come to our booth if you change. You need to be smaller or look different. They were all like, come over here with all of your curves and all of your beauty and exactly how you are. And it was just this, like, I'm getting chills as I say it because it was just this magnificent moment for me because I thought, wow, if I at 10 years old, 15 years old, went to a conference that was like, come over here with your flaky skin. We're gonna like show you how to accentuate your eyes, even though you have psoriasis all over your face. Or we're gonna like show you how to, feel confident in the clothes that you're wearing, even though your skin is falling apart underneath them, whatever it is. My whole life would have been different. And I think I just had this moment and I was walking around that conference and I'm a very spiritual person. So I started talking to God and I was just like, okay, God, that could be something, but like, what would it be called? And I just started kind of having this conversation with like a spiritual conversation in my mind. And then I thought of the name Chronicon, like as I was walking around the conference. So that to me was like the chrysalis moment of like, oh my God, there's something here. It's even bigger than I think I probably understand. And I hope I can do it justice. I hope I can honor it is really how I feel.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for leaning into that feeling because what you've built is incredible. And I think, like I have 2 chronic illnesses and just speaking with others with chronic illness, it's exactly what you're saying. You just instantly feel a level of connection and support that you don't necessarily have in other places. My friends and family without chronic illnesses, they're really supportive, but there's just such a deep, immediate level of connection. So for you to say it's a whole community here that can feel that together and rely on each other for support, I think is just such a remarkable thing to do. So just thank you for leaning into that feeling and building it because I know it's not easy.
Thanks, Zoe. That's really sweet. Yeah, I think it's just like what we need. And I hope that I can continue to grow it and again, do it justice. But yeah, it was kind of like one of those things where it's like you can't not do it. It was just like so loud. It was so strong. I was like, okay, here we go. I have literally no idea what I'm doing and we're doing this anyway. So it was definitely, it's been a journey, but it's been great.
Yeah. What changes have you seen in terms of being a patient advocate? You talked about starting it before COVID and after COVID. So what changes have you seen?
I know this probably isn't true, but I would say for me, I didn't know any people talking about like living with a chronic illness before, like in 2018, 2019. I felt like it was so much more rare. And now I find that I'm seeing a lot more people who don't necessarily consider themselves like patient advocates, but they're leaders in their own work that they're doing. And they're also coming out with the fact that they have chronic illness and how they're managing it or that they're struggling with it. And I never saw that before. And I remember like one of my first posts about living with a chronic illness where it was like really focused on the chronic illness aspect. Whereas before that, I had kind of hidden my conditions like on my about page or like I would say it in the interview every once in a while. I wasn't ashamed of it, but I didn't want it to become my identity. So that was like a huge thing I had to grapple with for a while. But yeah, I just really did. I remember that post because I really felt like it was a big deal because people weren't really talking about it so much. Now I feel like I go on Instagram or TikTok and I find so many people are talking about these things and in their own unique way. And like there's just a variety that I never saw before, which I think is great because not everyone's going to resonate with the way that I talk about chronic illness and not everyone's going to resonate with the way that you guys talk about it. And there's hundreds of millions of people out there who have a chronic illness. So it's like there's enough people to try to reach.
And in thinking about that uniqueness and different voices, we know a lot of marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by chronic illness, but also aren't necessarily the people being uplifted or presented with opportunities. Can you talk about any advice you have for, uplifting those voices or how you've done so through Chronicon?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. As a woman of color myself, I think just like having the courage to speak out when it's not, first of all, it's not culturally very accepted as a South Asian woman. And I know a lot of people out there who come from certain cultures, they really grapple with that. I have been a firecracker since I was like 2 years old. I've just kind of done what I need to do. And I've always been like, it's really not about me. It's about something bigger than me. So like, you got to get out of my way and I'm going to do it anyway. So my Indian parents are pretty well versed in, my like ambition in that way. But I've talked to a lot of specifically South Asian women, but I think this runs across so many different cultures who really grapple with that. So I think, that's something I think about a lot, just having that courage, but also having that grace for yourself and that compassion for yourself as you try to use your voice. It's not something that we're taught to do in a lot of cultures and in a lot of marginalized communities. And I think it's just important to have that awareness as you're navigating it. I also think, I know for me with Chronicon specifically, I am so passionate about every single panel at our conferences having a diverse group of people. It's like the thing that honestly like keeps me up at night when I'm like producing the conference. It's like I will not rest until every single panel has as many marginalized communities like represented as possible. And it's only a challenge sometimes because, again, those people are not always encouraged to speak and use their voice, right? But it's not impossible to do. And I feel like it takes a little bit more effort, but it makes a lot more of an impact. And so I think more and more companies and communities need to be like fighting for that. It's imperative. It's kind of how people say like with accessibility, right? Like accessibility shouldn't be an afterthought. There shouldn't be an afterthought that like, oh, you need to have an ASL interpreter, or if there's a stage, you need to have a ramp and things like that. And that's how we treat accessibility with Chronicon too. But I think in showing diverse voices, in showing diverse perspectives, like that's been a huge part of what we do as well. And it should not be an afterthought. So I hope more people really take that into consideration as they build out content and communities going forward.
Well, you actually answered my question. I was going to ask if there's one takeaway for our listeners, but I think that what you just said really encapsulated what that might be. So I'll go to the next question. Where can we follow and get involved with Chronicon? Where can our listeners follow along?
Yeah, check us out on social media, especially on Instagram is where we're the most active, at Chronicon Official. And you'll see our green and pink logo there, so you should be able to recognize us. We're going to be doing, as I said, a spring and a fall tour in 2025. So definitely just follow us and we'll be promoting that and sharing about that on our Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nitika, for joining us today. We look forward to, seeing all that you do in 2025 and beyond. And I guess want to reiterate that thought that you said that accessibility and uplifting voices shouldn't be an afterthought. It should just be ingrained from the start. I think that's so powerful. And, I'm hoping we can continue working together to make that happen.
Yeah, me too. Thank you both so much. I love chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Nitika.
That was a lot of fun, Steven. It's always great talking to an advocate and just, learning more about Nitika's story and how she got to where she is today.
Totally. Great way to start the new year. I'm excited for 2025. Definitely. Before we go, we want to encourage everyone to check out all of our podcasts at ghlf.org/listen.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening to The Health Advocates, a podcast that breaks down major health news of the week to help you make sense of it all. If you like this episode, give us a rating, write a review, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. I'm Zoe Rothblatt.
I'm Steven Newmark. We'll see you next time.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation Podcast Network.